don't know that I would have been in agriculture if I didn't meet somebody like him on the early end, because a lot of times when you're trying to get into something new and you know nothing, it can be a little bit overwhelming. Bacteria in our home is probably a bigger threat.
Yes.
Right? Like having deadly bacteria growing in your house and molds.
Breathing around it.
Right?
Yeah.
Like I'm asthmatic. That would not be good.
This is why I'm so in love with podcasts, is because it is like we're discovering
it's
things.
A deeper
it's
thing,
totally
right?
A deeper thing, yeah. 45 minutes in, we're kind of into the deep waters now.
Right? It's why I love podcasts too. I mean, it's an addiction almost.
Welcome back to another episode of the NobleLore podcast. This podcast is brought to you by NobleLore. Our business, what do we do? Well, we manage podcasts. You show up and talk. We take care of the rest. So if you need full-on consultation, full-on production, full-on editing and distribution, we handle it all. Maybe you want to talk about baseball, or you want to talk about history, or you have a message that you need to get out and you don't know how to amplify it. We take care of it. With that being said, we're sitting here at Pop's Blue Moon. Thank you to the space for giving us this time, and it's one of the best dive bars in St. Louis, with not just alcoholic options, but non-alcoholic options, hemp-derived products, and it is definitely the best place in St. Louis to come and get cozy and have a little party. So with all that being said, we are here with Janice Person. Did I say that correctly?
Yeah.
Fantastic. Janice, welcome to the show.
Thanks. I'm happy I found this new spot. Like, this is a definite vibe.
100% it's a vibe.
I love it.
It's very, very casual, very comfortable, and a place to chill out and
exactly.
And stuff. Yeah, totally. So what I focus on in this podcast is a lot. It's the main driver of this is how to build a community, with kind of subtopics being around organized religion, communication, and sobriety. So maybe we'll hit all of those today, maybe we won't, but you have extensive experience in dealing with both city folk and farmers. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'm a communications person and sort of a connector of people, right? So I have a PR degree and journalism background and all that kind of stuff. And I really got into that difference of like where people sit and where people understand what's happening. I mean, like, it was so cool. The first time I went out on a farm, a farmer's like, hey, look at this soil. Let me show you something. And it was like, I was in science class, but it was really fun and cool because in high school and junior high, I didn't do incredibly well in things that they made you sit in one place and follow exact rules on. And science was like experiments were like very rule following. Mm-hmm. My mom would have told you a long time ago that was not going to be my thing. But then when you get to learn science from like people doing the work, I was like, oh, I could get into this. And I've always loved food. Like, why wouldn't you love food? So agriculture was a great spot for me, but I grew up in the city of Memphis. Like, I don't know that there's a similar thing here, although people do say they're St. Louis City. Mm-hmm. In Memphis, it's inside the loop. So there's a loop that goes all the way around the city. Everything outside it is suburbs.
Gotcha.
I'm from inside.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think that's right. It's because what you were experiencing there wasn't science per se. It was like art and play almost.
And environmentalism, right? Mm-hmm. Like, I'm like, soil, tell me more. Like, there's earthworms and it was a winter rainy day. It was not unlike today, quite frankly. But he got out and he grabbed a shovel and he did a spade full of it. We were talking about something, it's called conservation tillage, and it's really important in soil health. But it was a long time ago because I was still in grad school. And so I had never heard anything about it. And I just was all in. He was explaining how root systems created these pathways for water to be pulled into the soil so it'll be there when he needs it, when he's planting his crop. And I'm like, tell me more, man. I was 100%. He was reeling me in.
I think I've heard you talk about some of this on your podcast. It sounds like he was crafting a story almost. Like, that's how you were able to understand it.
He's the kind of guy that talks to you like your grandpa talks to you, right? Like, he wants you to learn stuff, but he also wants to talk with you, right? Like, so it wasn't instructional. it was like, what are you seeing? And
Discovery.
all that stuff. And I'm like, oh my gosh, well, I'm noticing this and I'm noticing that. And it's funny because he doesn't realize what an impact he's had on me. And I go back and I talk to him about it and stuff. He recently passed, but I went back and I'm like, I don't know that I would have been in agriculture if I didn't meet somebody like him on the early end, because a lot of times when you're trying to get into something new and you know nothing, it can be a little bit overwhelming. And agriculture has a lot of science, a lot of business, a lot of things that were totally foreign to me. And he was somebody who just allowed me to be really curious and then helped me understand. And then he helped me meet people later. So, like he was all the things.
So so someone like that who teaches you to communicate in such a way, your history and communications, how do you see that pattern playing out unsuccessfully in other things? Maybe you see a parent that isn't teaching their child right. Like, how do you see that going?
Well, I think we all do it sometimes. I mean, sometimes I have really unsuccessful communications moments. I think a lot of us get so busy with what we know that when we talk to somebody, we get condescending, and that turns most people off, or it pisses them off and they want to prove to you they know more than you think they know, right? So that condescension is something that can happen really quickly. And it's because sometimes people ask you the same question that you've been asked how many times, and you're tired of answering the same question, but for them, it's the first time they've ever known somebody they could ask that question to, right? Like, and that's the thing for me, when I got into agriculture, I realized there were so many people, like a million years ago when Twitter first started, you had to pick a name, and I was not smart enough to pick a short name. I picked a long name, and now it's followed me on all the social media channels, right? So I'm JP Loves Cotton, and it's because I wanted to talk to other farmers and other people in agriculture, but I didn't want to pretend I knew stuff about those, but I knew cotton because I'd worked in cotton a long time.
In what sense? How did you work in cotton?
I worked for a magazine called Cotton Farming Magazine, which I know everybody and your listeners, y'all are going to be checking that out, I'm sure. But I also worked for a PR agency in New York that did a lot of stuff in the cotton, rice, peanut markets. And I just really, kind of got drawn in. And then I worked for a cotton seed company. And most people haven't thought about why you need 15 different varieties of cottonseed.
Why do you?
Well, because somebody in South Texas wants to grow it, and then somebody in the Missouri Boot Hill wants to grow cotton. And like one variety probably doesn't do really well in both of those places.
Gotcha.
Right? So like, they have a really long summer in South Texas, not so long in the Missouri Boot Hill. And wow, the humidity in a place like the Mississippi and the Boot Hill versus Arizona and stuff. So there's all those things that, I mean, even after working in cotton for years, I got a job working with a cottonseed company, and I was still kind of going, how many different kinds is there? But people always would send me like a picture. They were driving and they're like, I see a cotton field. And if you can be excited for them, they want to tell you all about it, and they want to ask you questions. And so that, like, putting a carrot out there so you can encourage curiosity always works for me. It's probably not for everybody, right? Some people, if you're a professor or if you're at this or at that and you're really trying to be the expert, maybe you're not trying to encourage a lot of curiosity. Maybe you want to be the expert. Maybe you just want people to listen to you, but that's not my gig. And I found talking to people and like, oh my gosh, are you serious about that? Like it makes people smile when they're talking to you, and then they want to tell you more. And then they're like, wow, she's learning a lot, and they feel good about themselves. And I really am learning. So why not do it that way? It's worked for me a long time.
I'm totally with you. That's I probably say this on the podcast at least once a podcast, but one of my favorite quotes is from Friedrich Nietzsche, and it's man's maturity is to have regained the innocence of a child at play.
Right.
And like that seems to be the epitome of what you're talking about.
Exactly.
Here.
And in today's world, we're trying to learn everything, right? Like, and none of us remember what we learned in like junior high and high school, right? I was working on some things recently with water, and I have a niece that's working with me, and she's asking me questions. We were talking about aquifers, And I finally said, well, there's the soil, and then there's the rock, and then there's like eventually it filters down, and that's where the water is held in the aquifer. She goes, oh my God, this is like earth science, but like until I like went, this is what an aquifer is, this is why it matters. She was like, I don't picture it in my head, and I can't get it. And
That's
some
right.
of us,
Why it matters is such
some
a
of us are
crucial piece.
visual thinkers, right? So figuring out how to tell people visuals and helping them see it really makes a difference. Some people are numbers people. So, finding different ways to help other people learn is a really big thing that I've had to do. And some of that is in contentious spaces.
Say more.
Oh gosh. I think when Vance was on your show, he talked a little bit about like how he was kind of excited about coming behind the curtain and he was going to, either expose it or just learn crazy amounts of stuff. Well, that was all created because there was this whole industry online of people who were making money by pushing back on one topic and creating controversy and all this stuff. There were a lot of people that were fundraising over pushback on GMOs and things like that. So,
and they were making money through lawsuits.
Through lawsuits, through fundraising, through like clickbait. It's all the things we see today, right? Whether it's politics or medicine or whatever, you have people online who've gone, oh, I can make money, right? And it's so hard to be an average person online because you start learning a little bit about something, but you don't know when you're beyond your depth. Does that make sense? Like it's the Dunning-Kruger, right?
Yep.
Like you don't know when you've gone too far, but you also are really drawn into certain personalities and things like that. And so you may not be getting the other viewpoints. You may not have things that are triggering critical thinking.
That's
and
right.
it was really early. I think agriculture, because it's such a small percentage of America that are farmers, you had really powerful names like Michael Pollan, right? He's like huge. He had written stuff for the New York Times and he's got all these books and he goes in and he writes these books about what he learned about farming. Well, I still don't know. I still learn about farming every time I talk to farmers and stuff. And I've been in it longer than you've been.
It's a great line.
Right? So, but I'm still learning about it all the time. So, there's got to be gaps in those books, right? There's gaps in all our books. But if you're learning so much, you don't realize, oh, wait a minute, that may not all line up. He may be giving me great things to think about, but he may not have every answer.
Well, that's the danger of the internet is this people or anything is you have to talk with conviction. And when you talk with conviction, you're so charismatic that people get totally on board with you. You have to be confident in
what you know, right?
Right.
Because if you waffle too much, then in today's world, people will like, whoa, wait a minute.
And they'll go find someone else to follow.
Right? Right?
Yeah.
But that's not necessarily a great way to live your life or to like cultivate the life I wanted at least, right? So for me, I needed to find people who kept me objective.
How do you do that? This is great.
Well, I worked at Monsanto and my brother has an organic co-op. So there's a good way, right? People used to say, oh, I want to come to y'all's house for Thanksgiving because they assumed that we would just argue the whole time. Well, you don't do that with family, right? When you have a different viewpoint.
Why? Because some of my audience may not even be familiar with what you're talking about. What are the dynamics going on there that you're speaking about?
So Monsanto's a company that sold like crop protection products, right? So things that were manufactured in a facility.
Glyphosate being the...
Glyphosate Roundup is one of the biggest, but also like I worked a lot with seeds that were Roundup ready. Well, if you aren't careful online, it will say that they've injected Roundup into the plant so that it can take Roundup, which was not the case. It was a little tiny bacterium they found that could resist it, right? So, and organic farming says, I don't want to have any of those things involved, right? I never had a problem with my brother growing things his way. I mean, heck, if you're going to grow food, good on you. Whatever it is that you're going to do, because that's hard work. Like, you're going to do the real work. And I don't think other people should get in the way of farmers using other tools, right? Because people like me who don't want to grow our own food really benefit from farmers being able to produce for more than their families. Just
Thank
more than their
goodness.
families. St. Louis, luckily, we're in the middle of a farm
Right.
belt, so there's a lot of farms around us. But like that's the thing. So people see what my brother does, and it is beautiful. I mean, like I've got a video of it from one on my podcast where he's like bottle feeding the lamb that's mom died in labor, right? Like, how fantastic is that? And he's planting his carrots, and he's still eating butternut squash now that he grew last summer, and he's got cabbage, and it's all good, right? But why does that then have to negate a farmer that's growing hundreds of acres instead of 10 acres, right? Like, but online, people want to make you think that you have to pick one way or the other. And so there was this like tension online. Now, you either have to be Republican or Democrat, and you have to be way over on that side or way over on that side. Like people don't want to let you just think, well, it's more complicated than that. Like immigration is a complicated topic. Like, let's not make it one or the other. Like we need some immigration. Do we need all immigration? Like all that stuff. But that was part of my job in agriculture, is to go out and find people that were uncomfortable with the way we were doing things in agriculture and help them get to know it so they could decide if they were really uncomfortable once they had some information available to them or not.
And did you find that they remained uncomfortable, or once the information was shown, they became more comfortable?
It depends, right? Like you don't win everybody over, right? Like,
is there a pattern of the type of person that would change their mind?
I would say there was a large pattern of people who had been made to fear food in the grocery store. And you may not know this, but there were absolutely people who would shake over having to go to like a grocery store and buy food, right? Like it was so scary to them because they weren't sure what's in the food. And I would say there's a lot of people like that now, but they're so worried about ultra processed or something. Like they've just moved on to a different topic, right? Than how the food is produced by the farmer. Now it's more the food companies. And, there's probably some variations of processed food. Like for me, there's a kind of milk that's been ultra processed, so it doesn't have all the lactose in it. So I drink more milk than I ever did before because I have ultra processed milk, right? So how does that, does that mean it's bad?
That's what my mother would think.
Yeah, probably. Lots of
Not
people
to call you
do,
out, Mom.
right? But probably my brother probably doesn't drink it either. It's ultra filtered. Like it's just got extra layers of filtering.
Right. What does that mean? Extra layers of filtering. What's going on in that filtering?
So, pasteurization is warming it and getting the bacteria and stuff out, right?
Okay. Sure.
Yeah.
I don't know, but yeah.
Louis Pasteur. Look it
okay.
up. But then filtration helps, like that lactose is a natural part of milk.
Okay.
And so how can you get it out? You can if you filter it. And so people like me then can drink milk because we have lactose issues, right? So some processing is really good for me, I think, because otherwise I wasn't drinking milk. And milk has a lot of vitamins in it and stuff like that. That's okay. Thing. Right. So there's all those kind of things that like it goes online and you cannot tell what's good information or what's bad information. And none of it's good or bad, right? Like probably there probably is some bad, but there's variations of degrees. And, like most people I disagree with, I have to agree with them on some things, even if I really fervently disagree with them on some other things. They say some other things that really do match up to science or that match up to my life experience or that match up to something, right?
Absolutely. So that kind of makes me start thinking then of, I see RFK coming in and if I have no knowledge other than just what I'm kind of fed by this side or this side, I have two kind of perspectives of him. And then when I talked with Vance, there was a little bit more nuance in this. Is RFK coming in and Is he right in a lot of things that he's saying? Is what are people missing about his message that might be a novel take?
Gosh, like yesterday, farmers are all over this and they're going to talk about it all day, right?
Yeah.
So I think there are some things in farming and agriculture that a lot of people like me think is nice by having local farmers. I really like it, right? There's like a lavender farm I love to go to just outside the city. And Boyard's Meats buys from David Price. And I've met David and his beef is great and all of those things, right? Well, at some point, like, how do you decide what products are going to be used on farms? In the US, what we've done is we've always used science as the guide to decide. So if you test it and there's any chance that it would produce cancer, you either don't use it or you have really strict limitations. And like every product, I think it's funny. You and I can buy something for our home, like a cleaner of some sort. And how detailed do you read the directions?
No, I don't read them at all.
Right? Right? I hear Jake over there laughing. Jake obviously doesn't read them either.
I'm putting Windex in my cereal or something. Yeah, I'm messing the whole thing up.
So, but with farmers, there are like those labels are federal law that come with them. And there are classes every winter that talk to you about what you need to know. And can you use this one near a lake? Well, how far from a lake do you have to be before you could use that one? Because maybe that would cause problems for frogs. Or, whatever it is, gotcha. Right?
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of rules and laws to that seem to get overlooked in this thing of like, oh, but it can cause blah, blah, blah. Well, like seriously, look at the labels on those cleaning supplies and the stuff that we, like it's a little bit crazy what all it can do. But bacteria in our home is probably a bigger threat.
Yes.
Right? Like having deadly bacteria growing in your house and molds.
Breathing around it.
Right? Like I'm asthmatic. That would not be good, black mold. So using the scientific basis the way we've done it, I'm not sure he's 100% on the science side.
Gotcha.
Right? Like he's decided some things that don't really seem to match up to what I would call peer-reviewed science.
Could you
describe
some of those?
Well, that's in vaccines and other things, right? So, I grew up in a time, your mom probably knows this, like maybe. I grew up in a time when if one kid got the chicken pox, they immediately put all the kids with them, so we just get it all over with at once.
Yeah.
Right?
Was that scientifically backed?
No, but it was something that worked really well for parents.
Gotcha.
Let's go ahead and get all the kids sick, so it doesn't just keep coming back and like tear our community apart.
Gotcha.
So then there are vaccines where you don't necessarily have to make your children get sick so they don't get sick again, right? We all got chickenpox as kids. That means we're carrying the genes for the things for shingles, right? It'd be nice not to have had chicken pox, Like I had them between my toes. It itched for days and days and days, right? Like it was uncomfortable. But so I'm team vaccine because I've been to places like India and stuff where there are diseases I would never have been exposed to, right? Like my people are not an Indian people. You can see it in my melanin levels. But something like, you get exposed to something really different than you ever would have before. I mean, it's the same thing with not drinking the water in Mexico, right? Mexicans drink the water all day. They're used to it. Their bodies are used to it. It's not anything bad for them. It's just we're not used to it. So if I could take something and it would make me able to drink the water while I was in Mexico for a few weeks or eat whatever fresh food I wanted to wherever I was, I'd probably do it. Which would be like a vaccination. So I mean, the science process and getting that peer review, it's hard and it takes a lot of time and you can miss something. So you can't be absolutely 100% certain, right? Because if something new comes up, you have to check it and see, wait a minute, we never did test on that. We didn't know to test for that. Let's do it. And it takes real time. And then you have to do it where it's double blind so that like people don't know whether they got whatever, like all that kind of stuff. So, I think it's going to be hard because I think there are things that Kennedy probably is bringing up, like maybe we shouldn't eat as much processed food. I really think most of us need to eat more fresh fruits and vegetables. Like, would be a really good thing to do. And think about how much grain we're eating versus, you know, I have friends that think every time they have steak, it has to be a huge steak. Is that really what you need? Right? Like, most of us don't want to think about that on our own basis, and we certainly don't want somebody else telling us about it.
We
right?
want to outsource it. There's too much information to consume in the first place to where we need to just kind of have a few different pieces of confidence in who this person says or this person says, offload it, and then on to the next thing that's going on.
Yeah, but
in our
you
lives.
Turn around one day and then suddenly everybody's giving up wheat because
right.
gluten.
Right.
And it's like, but my family is we've loved gluten for generations. Right. Like, my people love bread, right? But suddenly it's like that's the answer to everything. Well, it probably does cause some problems for some people. Yeah, celiac, definitely a problem. Maybe overindulging, like eating pasta every day, that might cause me some problems over time, right? So
I'm in that camp probably. Yeah.
I love pasta. You know, like, my family has never met a carb we didn't like, right?
Yeah,
like my nephew's biggest complaint in life was when his mom took his roll out of his hand so he could eat his birthday cake the first time. It's like, but he had a roll.
Well, something you said in there is of it makes me just think about this as far as how people are coming to understand things, and like, we're just a really particular or peculiar species in that, like, we're so bad at understanding numbers, because when there's like a 0.01% chance it might happen, we think it could happen to us. But then on the other side of things, you know, we look at catastrophes or whatever these things are, and this, like, we can't even comprehend what 1 million people looks like.
Right.
And like, so on one end of the spectrum, we think it could happen to us, but you look at like the data behind driving a car and car accidents, we still go out and drive every day.
But it's easy to get really caught up in ourselves, right? Like, I mean,
and it's not a bad. I mean, I think it's just a phenomenon of humans.
Whatever it is, right? Like, there was a plane crash, and I saw, you know, somebody's like, my mom is a flight attendant at American Airlines. You can't tell them not to worry because they didn't know where their flight path was and all that stuff. And you know, and then you think, like, the chances that it's your mom are so small. Like, what a hard life to worry about so deeply, right? And then I totally understand I'd be worried just as badly. Like, I double checked one of my little cousins works for American, and I double checked to make sure she was posting silly stuff today, right? So, but understanding, and part of that is also that emotion that's preyed on us with information now. Like, you're either going to be outraged, you're going to be scared to death, there's always, and it creates chaos in understanding. Like, I can't be rational if I'm so busy being so upset about stuff.
I think I have a friend, her name's Oliviana. Shout out Oliviana. I hope she watches this so that she can see this. She's a broadcaster, or a news broadcaster, but she travels around and does these things. And she made an interesting point to me, which I think we have the tendency to blame the media for going in this direction. But, you know, I think on the same side of the coin, or the other side of the coin, we have to remember we're the ones that are consuming this. Like, we're the ones that are reacting to this. So the media is kind of going in the direction that we're pushing them in to some degree. And
right. And when you push back, like right now, it seems like a lot of people have decided they're going to remove some apps from their phone. Yeah. Right. You get enough people pushing back on certain things change. I mean, there's pendulums, right? So right now you're going to slide one way or another, and occasionally it gets too far and people learn, whoa, now that's not going to serve my interest. And I think that's part of it. In today's world, and when I was growing up, it wasn't nearly like this, but in today's world, how do you decide who you listen to and who you don't? And where do you get to be like a little bit against the man, or, you know, like out of the system or something? Because I did all that stuff, right? Like, I mean, you know, I pushed back on all the things. And then, but how do you do it and still get good information at some points, right? Like, so that you're not misleading yourself. Because most people aren't taking a whole tribe of people with them when they get things wrong. They may take a few people with them when they get things wrong. You know, the influencers taking tribes. They're taking crowds, right? Like, they're taking millions. And at a certain point, that thing you said earlier about, well, showing vulnerability
Mm-hmm.
or being uncomfortable with something and saying, well, I'm just not sure. That's when a lot of people go, whoa, why am I listening to
Yeah,
you? Like, if you're
absolutely.
not sure, I want out.
I want conviction in what I'm. Absolutely, I need
Because
conviction
I'm
in
sure.
order. Right,
I was
I'm
sure
Yep,
today. I was sure
that's
2
it.
days ago. And now you're telling me you're not sure? What do
That's
you
it.
mean?
This
right?
is why I'm so in love with podcasts, is because it is like we're discovering
It's
things.
a deeper
It's
thing,
totally
right?
a deeper thing. Yeah,
It's not 200 and whatever characters.
Right. 45 minutes in, we're kind of into the deep waters now. Of
right.
Like, what is this?
It's why I love podcasts too. I mean, it's an addiction almost to the point of like what else you can learn and what else you can find out about and things like that.
Yeah, to me, it's like it's fending off a very dark place that social media might take it, of the short form and these kinds of, right? And so, and figuring that out through conversation.
Those TikTok videos, they certainly can get like the hairs on the neck back up, and you want to tell everybody what you've just learned, right? And you direct message it to everybody, and
that's right.
All that stuff, right?
Yeah. And when you're talking about, who you trust, like, I'm curious what you think about this, because I just kind of, at this point in my life, I've thrown my hands up and just go, okay, I can discern that this person seems like a person of integrity and character. Like, that's all I can go off of, and anyone that I follow. And I don't know if that's the
hard,
right way, but
right? It's hard. And I think trusting systems is harder now than it used to be, right? Like, it's just hard to assume because somebody's a university professor.
Mm-hmm.
They've got it going on. And on the other hand, most university professors probably are pretty good in the topics that they are in, right? Like they've worked in a long time. They've read a lot. They probably know far more than you and I would ever know.
Mm-hmm.
But man, some of them seem a little bit wacky, right? So you don't want to automatically assume. And it's a tough one. So I think, finding those organizations and people that you think, they actually did tell me this is one thing, I just don't know that I can go along with it. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm not going to really push back on it. I just don't know that I can get on the bandwagon. Mm-hmm. When I see that, those are the people I go, I need to hear from them more. And I absolutely search out people with different perspectives than mine to try and find people that I can find. Maybe they're being objective, but with a very different viewpoint.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
Right.
How do you cultivate that?
It's hard because the algorithms suck you in so bad.
That's right.
But what I found is finding people in real life that you can actually have conversations with that. I mean, I don't know if what you and I agree on or disagree on other than what we've talked about in this. I mean, like, I agreed to be on the podcast with you, right? Because you knew somebody I knew. And, but like I listened to a few shows. I don't know that we agree on everything. I don't know that we agree on things that I would consider holding dear to my heart. But I still know I can have conversations with people that I might disagree with, right? Mm-hmm. And part of the process of my growth as an adult enabled me to disagree with members of my family, right? Like, my parents disagreed on some key things when I was growing up, and I realized they disagree. It's not a big deal. Now, they may make comments about it now and then and jokes about it and stuff, but okay, they each respect that the other one has a position. Mm-hmm. And the same thing with like a lot of my friends. So I have not been one of those people, and you see it all the time. If you don't, blah, 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 we can't be friends. And I know usually it's a joke, but at some point, some people might go, but like, really? Mm-hmm. Like, we can't be friends if I'm not aligned on this one little thing. Like, we've known each other for 5 years or whatever it is. Mm-hmm. It feels kind of crazy. So developing longer term relationships with people where you can have conversations that get into some depth, to me, really has been helpful. Finding people that are experts in other topics is awesome. Like, I have a couple of friends who went to med school who I think are smart. And I'm like, hey, what do you think about this? Like, I'm hearing a lot about stuff, and I don't know. And usually those people are not going to tell you it's 100% one way or the other, right? They usually understand there is some movement. Generally, here's where I am. I can see there may be places where I'd be 100%, but generally, and looking for that gray instead of the black and white is hard.
Nuance. Yeah, totally.
It's hard.
Totally. And I think it's part of it is being able in that piece that you're talking about of searching these people out. Like at first, if you're going to be able to tolerate people around you that have different opinions, it's separating my identity from my beliefs.
Right.
And like figuring out how to do that is probably the tricky part.
Right.
You know,
I mean, I still have trouble.
Sure. Totally.
On some days, right?
Totally.
Because something feels so core to who you are.
Yeah.
Right. Like, wow, wait a minute.
Why do you think that is? Why does it feel like it's your core?
I think there are different things that happen to you at life in different places that it just becomes such an integral part of who you are.
It's part of your story, perhaps.
It really is, right? Like, it's funny. I will tell you, the one that's killing me right now is people call me a blonde. And I've been a redhead my entire life. And my hair has been losing its, like, it's killing me. But I have to go, oh my gosh. Like, I really am a blonde. It's not very bright red or orange anymore. It really, but it's funny because it makes me question, it almost makes you question who you are, right? Because you've always been this thing. If you're a soccer player and then you have an accident and you can never play soccer again, like, are you the same person? Well, at your core, you really are. My hair was really not that big of a deal in my life. But like, it is something that's you see every time you look in the mirror. Soccer is something you enjoyed and you played and all those things, right? So it feels like it's a bigger part of you than it is when something might be taken away or something might be challenged or, right? A lot of people feel this about their religion. So like, if my religion is this, and you say something that makes it sound like you don't value that, how does that work for you, right? Or whatever it is, right? Like, it's easy to let yourself get tied up on things versus really what matters.
Totally. And that's and I think about the way that, like, you know, maybe city people perceive farmers and farmers perceive city people, and that ties in somewhere of like, this is their lived experience and this is how I conceptualize different people from me and understanding things. But what would you say that people from the city, because you've been involved in both, what do they misunderstand about farmers?
Oh, wow. There's so many different things. Like, I think there's an idea that we assume farmers should live what we think is the ideal of farmers. And a lot of farmers don't want that.
What is that?
So my brother's living the ideal. He has it's supposed to be a red barn, but it's kind of purple because sun bleaches stuff out. He's got like 2 pigs and 40 chickens and 5 sheep. I don't know what he has really, but and then he has this nice big huge garden. Like, people think farmers should live that way. Well, how many people do you think he's going to feed beyond his household and the other people that help him out on his farm? Like, that's who they're feeding. They may sell a few extra eggs and stuff, but right. So for most of us, like, you're not just like a communications guy. You're like doing podcasts for people, right? Like, you're so infinitely niche down. So why do we think that farmers shouldn't be able to niche down and be able to be better at something, right? So farmers who focus on beef cattle all the time, like, the amount of stuff they know about beef cattle compared to you and me, they don't know anything about pigs though. And they'll tell you, right? Because that's not their deal. But they live with beef cattle, like, out their back door or something, right? The amount of information they develop and the amount of expertise that they know, and they're going to conferences for multiple days to talk about new diseases that might be on the horizon, or like something as simple as when a cow is out in the field, and we've all driven past them, right? Like, they're out on the pasture and you see all the cows, and if you stop your car, they're probably going to look at you and wonder what's going on. If they're dairy cows, they may come towards you, and if they're beef cattle, they'll go away, right? But if a cow has their head up like that, it probably means they have a respiratory problem, right? I would never know that. until a cattle person told me, right?
Totally.
And so learning those kind of things, and farmers love being able to get really deep in stuff, right? Like they love that. They get that deep knowledge of knowing what they're doing and generational knowledge. Like they're calling their dad or their granddad to ask, wait a minute, what else do I need to know? Here's what I'm seeing. I've never seen it before, right? So I think that's a thing most of us don't think about, right? Like we work in niches and we think farmers might not.
Gotcha.
Or something.
Yeah, that does sound right. Because I would assume, like, well, this farmer, if he knows about cattle, he knows about pigs, and he also knows about soybeans, and you know.
But they'll tell you, like, I really don't know about that, and then they get nervous, and I'm like, but the thing is they have far more expertise about livestock than you and I would ever have. No matter what kind of livestock or what kind of crop, they know so much more than you and I do, right? Like, I mean, maybe I'm getting like I can beat them on cotton. Some of those the livestock guys I can beat on cotton. But there's a lot of those things that people just don't think about, right? And I think for most of us, we don't think about agriculture in its wholeness. So we think of farmers and farming. And we love the farmers markets. I mean, like, do you? I mean, why wouldn't you love them, right?
Oh, yeah.
But like, how many people do you know that really need to work at a farmer's market and interact with people? Like there's a bunch of people in my family that I'm like, you do not need to be around people that much, right? And so there's some farmers that probably just don't need that, right? Or they live in the middle of Nebraska and there's not really that many farmers markets that are going to be set up in that one immediate area or something, right? So there's a lot of different things. Some of them are cultural, some of them are scientific, some of them are political. There's they're dynamic people, how they set up their businesses, right? They're small business people, just like all of us.
That's actually, because I have like my theory is that every single one of us are really highly social creatures. And if you're an introvert, it's because it was kind of beat into you somehow. But do you see that, farmers are typically more, I don't know, antisocial, or are they more outgoing than you would have?
I don't think that at all. I think there are farmers that are absolutely introverts, but there are like I'm off the scale as an extrovert. There are farmers that are beyond me, and
totally.
stuff, right? And there are some farmers that are just like not sure. They don't come in contact with so many strangers in a day,
right?
Like
that's
just coming here today, I stopped. I got a haircut. I went to the return something I'd bought that I decided I didn't like. Like how many people did I come in contact with on the way here versus how many farmers are going to come in contact with how many people?
They have to be more comfortable with being by themselves.
They have to be, right? And they also have deeply trusting relationships then. So people like me, born in Memphis, lived in half a dozen states or more. I didn't even know how to renew a driver's license for like the first, I don't know how long, because I moved from state to state every time, right? So renewing it, that wasn't really a thing. But most farmers are pretty close by to either where they grew up or their spouse grew up or something like that, right? And they have a whole network that most Americans no longer have. Like we didn't go to, most of us, like when I was young, my parents lived in one neighborhood. My grandmother was still in the same city. Most of my uncles and aunts were in the same city. My family, my brother's in Ohio, my sister's in North Carolina. I have a sister who was in Japan. Now she's in Memphis. My brother was in Germany and Israel sometimes. We're not all in the same place. So how do you make that community of really trusted people with diverse backgrounds and diverse experiences? It's a lot harder. And that gets to the finding people that you can meet in real life and figuring out ways to do that. And finding real world ways to network with people has become the thing. I've moved how many times in my life, and St. Louis, it's even when I moved here, I know I'll work with a lot of people that know agriculture, but I'm going to get a little more serious about this blogging thing and go to blogging conferences so I can meet people that do something absolutely not connected to agriculture. And that was long before I was helping figure out how to connect the dots for people, right? But it was just that curiosity of, I don't want to be totally reliant on, and some people do it through a moose lodge or
Yeah, right,
whatever
right,
it
right,
is,
right.
their church or their kids'
Right.
school or their soccer or whatever it is, like whatever you're passionate about and stuff. But a lot of times we only talk to people about that thing that we share. And if you take dinner with them instead of just going to the same games or something, and you talk about other things and get a little uncomfortable,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
you don't have to get like mad, but get a little uncomfortable and shake yourself out of that comfort zone. Like the growth potential is
That's right.
amazing. Like
Yeah.
that's where you
Yeah.
get really powerful connections.
Yeah. This is very in line with the idea of it's not necessarily how long you've known someone, but it's how many different contexts have you known someone in.
Yeah.
And so, if I were to try to go make a friend as fast as I possibly could, I wouldn't hang out with them all day, every day at the coffee shop. Let's say let's go horseback riding or go watch a movie or like go, you know what I mean? Let's go out and do all of these different
at
things.
some point, you're going to do something you're not comfortable with.
Absolutely.
They're going to do something they're
Absolutely.
not comfortable with. And you learn a lot about each other
Absolutely.
and yourselves.
Yeah, totally. Right? So if you were to take a farmer and you found out he or she was moving to St. Louis City, how would you teach him how to like integrate into the city and into
so
a community?
Funny. I haven't really, like I had a friend who moved here from Iowa. Can I use, she's back on the farm. Okay. So she was a farm kid and she had moved to Des Moines, which is somewhat of a city, right? But it was in Iowa. So you still have, like, I think people here have the same thing. Like they have all their friends from Mizzou or they have all their, whatever it is, right? And so when she came here, her husband got a job here. So she was coming, okay, what do I do? And the thing of like helping her get to meet other people that have a little bit of shared experience. So she has that comfort zone, but then the other things are going to be uncomfortable and helping her kind of navigate some of that. And, let's go to a happy hour with my friend so-and-so. And then after a while, that friend would invite her somewhere else, right? Mm-hmm. And you just start getting to know other people and start figuring out what else is around you that maybe you wouldn't think to look for. Right? Like there's
totally
different things that you always went to immediately in your hometown. And this is something, if you've ever moved from one place to another, you really have to do that. Right. So, and like figuring out what to experience in the city, like, oh man, I mean, I've taken God knows how many people to Forest Park for different things. Right. And go, here's the deal. Like, this is amazing. Right. And then there's like this Carl's Burgers over on Manchester, right? And once you find that, and it's like, no, if you don't have cash, they're not. I mean, like you have to have cash, or that ATM is going to charge you a huge fee, right? Like, like, but there's all those things, and getting into neighborhoods is part of it, right? So if you're only on the big streets with the big names and that stuff, you're probably not getting to know the city at all. You got to get on some back streets and
get on those unpaved, unshoveled.
Oh
streets,
yeah.
Right now. Don't get the snow on them.
Yeah, the ones where they have not had trash pickup in weeks.
Yeah, right. That's where you really know.
That's when you know you're. Yeah, that would be hard for farmers. They would probably have a blade on the front of their pickup and be doing that,
taking care of it right up. That's right. That's kind of how I perceive. That's how I perceive farmers almost. If I were to see a farmer that came in from, I know several now through Vance who before I really didn't know any, and I'm like, okay, if they lived in the city and these streets, these side streets didn't have, still had snow on them or ice on them, they would have just figured out a solution to go and fix it up real quick. Is that fair to think?
So they do it at home all the time, right?
Right.
Because they need to, because nobody else is going to do it for you, right? So you learn to be really self-sufficient. And that's one thing it's funny. I built this whole training program. And one of the things is like, you have to help people understand the difference in what community looks like. Because if you're a farmer and you live in a rural community, chances are you or somebody else in your family is a volunteer fire department member, right? Like you're going to get trained. You're going to figure out how you help save a house. And how, if somebody is like their boat has overturned, you're figuring out how to rescue them, because you can't call a helicopter of professionals to come do it, right? And so that's part of the thing too, right? That is a little bit different. Now, I will tell you, I love having a professional fire department. I mean, seriously, professional police department has been okay for me, right? Like it hasn't worked against me other than like a speeding ticket now and then,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
But to think that I had to do that, I mean, I've lived in rural places where like, well, you're either part of the fire department or you're going to every fundraiser and you're helping raise money and all that stuff. Because
There's
when your
expectation
house,
regardless.
well, I mean, your house is
Yeah.
on fire. You want to know those people have gotten the training they need, right? That they've got the equipment they need. That you don't want them to show up in a fire truck from the Andy Griffith show or something. You want them to show up in a fire truck that can get the fire put out,
Yeah, that's right.
right? And that's on you. It's not coming from anybody else. There's not a big, huge city budget. That's not the way small towns work. So helping people understand those things that are really more cultural, as well as the science and the business, is a lot of fun. I mean, Vance and I didn't grow up in agriculture, really, and it's kind of neat to learn those things and then help other people get that experience. Because in today's world, I think more of us need to understand how our food is grown. I love it when people decide to plant just a few herbs or tomatoes or whatever, because it's hard.
Right.
Like you will be out of town for 2 weeks in July and you will come back and there will be nothing left unless you were smart enough to like go through all the things and either figure out an irrigation system or like have friends come over and water everything or, and you start going, oh, so it is like an all the time thing once the crop is in the ground, like, or once the calf has hit the ground or whatever, right? And it's a little different for a lot of us. It's a different kind of weight, but it's a different kind of lifestyle too, right? Like
Totally.
it's part of every day for you.
That's amazing. I really like a lot of the things that you brought up there. Let's talk about then you mentioned like of what it is you do, because as I understand it, really you help someone like me, someone from the city that wants to get into agriculture, integrate into that culture, into that profession, whatever it may be.
Yeah. Well, I don't know that. Yeah. I think integrate's a much better word than assimilate, right?
Okay.
So, and part of it is, like so many companies are hiring people that do different things now, right? So in farming, we use drones. In farming, we use, everything's on our iPads that are coming off of exactly what's happening in the tractor. There's data science that's just like
AI will
crazy levels.
Yeah.
There's been AI. There are like automatic weeders that like have like lasers on them and zap the weeds. I mean, there's crazy cool stuff going on, but it requires people who aren't farmers or farm kids, or if they were, they probably went off and studied something really very different, right? So feeding ourselves is something we need more hands on deck for than fewer, right? Like, so this thing, I'd really love to pull more people back into agriculture because we need people thinking about how do we get more fresh produce to the market in time, and how do we get more lentils, right?
Yeah.
Or whatever it is. And each farmer is going to think about their piece, and each company is going to think about their piece. But if you were to go, well, I just created this great app and it has great potential for farmers. Do you know it really has great potential for farmers, or was it an idea you had? You started building it, and at some point you're going to want to sell it. How do you start understanding what farmers value and pay for and all those things?
You understand their language, you understand their culture, you understand what they do on a day-to-day.
You understand that you can't just show up on their farm tomorrow and say, let's plant corn, because like it's not time to plant corn, right? Or whatever it is, right? So I've been building this program that's kind of an onboarding into agriculture to help build like the framework of understanding for people. Not that I don't think I can build it all out, right? But if I can get you a good like scaffold and stuff so that you can have a good framework, then you start getting your experiences either working for a company or as you start talking to more farmers or something. So I talk to all the experts because, again, I'm not the expert on everything, right? So if I'm talking about cattle, then I have people, maybe some people with master's degrees in cattle and stuff. And then maybe I have some farmers that are talking about, here's what we're doing on my farm. And the idea is to not only show people what some of this really looks like in the real world, because it doesn't necessarily look like Netflix. I mean, I know lots of people love the TV shows and stuff, right?
There isn't a great like a TV show for farmers, right? Like a
Well,
drama or whatever.
yeah,
it
I
might be.
think Yellowstone is the one right now that a lot of people
Right.
think
And
for
those
the
are
Western
ranchers, aren't they?
ranchers, right? But yeah, there's not very many that really. I mean, there was one with like Dak Shepard was in Kansas fixing up an old house or something. It was crazy. But yeah, there's not a lot of understanding. I mean, how exciting is it to watch the wheat grow?
Mhm.
I mean, it's pretty damn exciting to farmers because it not growing is the thing they don't want to see. But so how do I help people do that? So I take them through like Ag 101, like basic things, getting to know how farmers set up their businesses and how they decide, what they're going to do in their communities. And is it a multi-generational business? Is it an LLC? Is it, what are you doing? And if you're growing corn, is that different than if you're growing hazelnuts? Like, how different are those things? So we have a lot of farmers that are involved in that. And then we talk about what retail looks like, because it's not like Target and Home Depot, right? They're not shopping there. So what do those things look like and how do they work? And what things do you actually have to have licenses for? Because just like we have to have a driver's license or a passport to do certain things, there are certifications that you have to buy certain products and stuff. It's kind of wild. So we go through that. We talk about sustainability from the way farmers and people on farms and agriculture talk about water, soil, all those things, which really matter to most of us. And then we start breaking into either crops or livestock. And we go through basics on crops and livestock. And then we finally get down to where like you could learn 2.5 hours of cotton. Like, where else are you going to get an understanding of cotton in the Mid-South versus Texas versus California and what matters? Like if you're, and what's cool is it's not only for people in agriculture. I think to me, like, I think this is a J. Crew shirt. So I think like J. Crew buys cotton. Wouldn't they like to know how farmers actually are doing it? Because a lot of those companies are putting in sustainability programs and stuff, right? And like, wouldn't it be nice to know how farmers really think about it and what they're doing before you try and say, here's what we need?
Right.
And so I think it's really the kind of thing that I think it's going to have a lot of applications, but I built it because people like me came into agriculture and nobody helps you understand the vocabulary. Like there's not a primer. Right. And if you go into most jobs, it's not as complex as all these different kinds of businesses that are in agriculture, so many different kinds of farms that are run in different ways. And you need to know some of that stuff if you're selling them seed or a tractor, or if you're going to be giving them a bank loan or whatever it is. Right. So this is just to try and help those people understand it better.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. People want to sell their product right away without understanding something fully. It sounds like a great solution to that. So how would someone, is the program finished or is it still in development, or tell me
it's always going to be under development, I think.
So
some of them are there. Yeah. So it's called Grounded in Ag, groundedinag.com.
Great. Put it in the old show notes.
Yeah. Exactly. Drop that link. And seriously, we have cotton, we have produce like nuts and vegetables and stuff like that. We have wheat, we have beef. We're still building out some of them. So last week I was interviewing a dairy veterinarian, talking about different things with dairy cattle. So we'll have that course up before long. And we have a bunch of them still coming. And then every time I turn around, I think of something else that people need to know, right? Like we spent an hour in a wheat lab where they test it for milling and then they make flour and then they're baking it. So on some of them, we're even going all the way through to the food products, because how you grow your wheat and the quality of that wheat is going to show up in the bag of flour that people like me get. And so if you're brand new and you're only thinking of the farmer, you also need to think of those folks on the other end. And the same thing with cotton, trees, right? Yeah. Like if cotton's out on really rainy days and it's already, open and things, if you don't harvest it in a good spot, then you're not going to make nice shirts out of it. You might make mattress batting. And do you know how much they pay for one kind of cotton versus another? your discount is a lot if you're selling mattress padding cotton
Gotcha.
versus Brooks Brothers shirts.
Yeah, right. Amazing. And so in this course, it's recorded like video, or is it?
Yeah,
Is it
so
with
it's all
some?
video, and most
Cool.
of them are done in in location. So we travel around a good bit,
So that's very cool.
which is kind of fun. We do some by Zoom. If you're doing like 3 hours on wheat, then probably 2 hours are done out in the field.
Gotcha.
And then we supplement with a lot of photography and stuff. Part of it is just knowing people like what to look for and what timing. Schedules are really important to farmers. They
I
plant.
imagine, yeah.
They plant one time a year. They harvest one time a year. And I don't know how many times I will get a phone call in December and somebody goes, "Hey, we're looking for some cotton farms. We want to go out and shoot video." And I'm like, "Okay, are you planning to go to Brazil in a few months or Australia? Because it's not going to be harvest time again here until next like October, September, right?" But people don't know.
Sure, totally.
And so hopefully a lot of people, as they come into the industry, this will be part of their onboarding instead of just the safety or business compliance things.
Right.
This is stuff where you actually get to meet some of the key players in the market. You get to see what they're talking about when they're talking about it, and you can come back and review it. And there's handouts and stuff. So the idea is it gets you some information before you do things. You might want to re-listen to it. It may be one of those things that you listen to it a second time, you pick up different stuff.
Yep.
Because maybe it was going too fast for you the first time.
Amazing.
But we try and make it. My niece who works with me has never worked in agriculture, so she asks lots of questions.
That's probably a good resource to have. Yeah.
Lots of questions on things, and she makes sure we put pop-ups. I go, "That's a word I've never heard. You got to explain what that word is, right?" So we're trying to make it really useful for people.
Amazing. So something that I like to ask, this has been a great conversation, but I like to finish something up with what do you think young people should be paying attention to right now? What is the most important thing?
I think who they listen to and why they listen to them and what are they getting out of it. Like, what are you getting out of it? What are the other people getting out of it? Because attention is so monetized now, and I think it's really easy to scroll and not think about those things. But your time and your attention and who you're paying attention to, all those things matter. And it's in your personal life as well as on your phone, right? So thinking about that makes a lot of sense. You can find great people who want to like hear what mentor or whatever, right? Like, I mean, I love working with new people, but some of that back and forth. And sometimes you need to challenge yourself on your communication styles versus others, For some of us, we're highly talkative. With my niece, I need to be less talkative and text her a little bit, and stuff before, like all of us can learn about how to interact with each other that way. But I think who you're listening to, I think too many of us don't think about that. I mean, I've seen an awful lot of accounts that I went, why was I following them? Like this is seeming really janky.
Yep.
I don't need it.
Yep. Totally. That's what I'm in the content world, obviously.
Right.
And so I'm learning, okay, like this is how people are selling to me and I don't even realize that they're selling to me at this time. Or, they're incentivized to put out a video once a week. They may not have an important message to put out. But
they're going to put that out.
They're going to put it out regardless, right? And these are things that
they're probably going to find a way to make you either hit the heart or the share or right?
Yep.
Or whatever it is. And like thinking about why you're sharing the things that you are.
Yeah.
Does it serve your purpose? Does it serve the other people? Right. Like, some of us have gone like, I just need to not hear anything about this topic. Like my brother-in-law told me about farming. I just need to not hear anything about farming for a while because he had heard enough. And I went, I appreciate him telling me though. Right. Because like you forget you're so passionate about it. You think this is so great. You want to share it all. And for him to say that, I was like, thank you. Ooh, that hurt.
Yeah.
But thank you.
Yep.
And then it's like, okay, yeah, I could do a little more balance in my life, right? Get a little more balanced. Right now, I think a lot of us probably need a little more balance. It's everybody pulls you towards one pole or the other.
We're getting stretched out.
It really,
Yeah.
right? Ugh, it's too much.
Well, fantastic. Janice, thank you so much for coming on and talking with me today.
This
has
was a lot of fun.
Great. I'm really glad to hear that. Is there anything else that we glossed over or something that you
I don't think so. I mean, I didn't come with a real agenda.
Great.
I came, well, all your other interviews were interesting. So hopefully you made this interesting for other folks.
I think it will be. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot.
Cool.